Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on seaweed farming in Zanzibar, Empowering Women and Improving Sustainability. This webinar is sponsored by the Reef Resilience Network, the Nature Conservancy Africa Program, and Global Aquaculture. I'd also like to give a big thank you to the folks from the Eastern Research Group who have been instrumental in organizing this webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Gralty, and I am the Engagement and Operations Specialist for the Reef Resilience Network and your host for today's webinar. This is our second of two webinars that will focus on sustainable aquaculture, with this webinar focusing on seaweed farming in Zanzibar. Last month, we hosted a webinar on seaweed farming in Belize. If you missed it, you can view the recording on reefresilience.org. In today's webinar, we will hear from George Maina from the Nature Conservancy Africa Program and Mondy Muhando from the Nature Conservancy Zanzibar Sustainable Seaweed Farming Project and the Ministry of Blue Economy and Fisheries, Zanzibar. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be 1 hour long. It is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on our website, and an email announcement will be sent after the webinar. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentations. There are two ways you can ask questions during the Q&A. First, you can use the Q&A box anytime throughout the webinar to send questions, and we will keep track of these for the end of the presentations. Or you can raise your hand during the question and answer session, and we'll call on you to ask your question during that time. You can raise your hand by clicking on the Raise Hand button. To lower your hand, click the Lower Hand button. Keep in mind you'll need to be able to unmute yourself to ask your question. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, such as trouble hearing or seeing the slides, please type a message in the question box and we'll try to help resolve the issue. Now, we would like to learn more about who is joining us today, and we have a few questions for you. First up, what is the focus region of your work? Do you primarily work in the Western Indian Ocean, the Caribbean Atlantic, the Northern Hemisphere of the Pacific, the Southern Hemisphere of the Pacific, or a different area? Wonderful. Looks like over 3/4 of you are joining us from the Western Indian Ocean. And then we've got a handful of folks who are awake out in the Caribbean and Atlantic and out in the Southern Pacific, and a few joining from somewhere else. If you're joining from somewhere else, go ahead and type in the chat box where you're joining us from. We're excited to learn more about you. Now, for our next poll, tell us more about the work that you do. Are you a marine resource manager, an aquaculture practitioner, or perhaps a scientist or researcher, a student, or something completely different? All right, we've got a good mix of folks today. About half of you are scientists and researchers, and then we have marine resource managers and aquaculture practitioners and a handful of students as well. First, I'd like to introduce George Maina today from the Nature Conservancy, who will kick off the presentations. George is a conservation scientist at the Nature Conservancy Africa Program, currently serving as Africa Fisheries Strategy Manager. George works on linking science, policy, and practice to advance sustainable aquaculture, fisheries reforms, and effective ocean governance, mainly in the Western Indian Ocean. George also has interest in conservation and restoration of blue carbon ecosystems and the role they play in addressing climate change and in providing additional ecosystem services and livelihood benefits. Take it away, George.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle, for that great introduction. And many thanks to all those who are joining us. We appreciate the effort and the opportunity to talk to you about this important subject of sustainable seaweed aquaculture in Tanzania. We are hoping that it's going to be a great session and learning from each other and exchanging ideas. So my talk this morning, I'm based in Mombasa and it is morning right now in Kenya. I'm going to give a talk about the overview of seaweed aquaculture in the region, particularly what TNC is working on. And so next. And just to give you an overview is that as TNC, our vision for fisheries is to ensure that fisheries is managed in a way that results in stable supplies of seafood, thriving coastal communities, as well as ecosystem conservation. And we do this by partnering with local fisher communities and other NGOs, as well as government, and particularly helping guide and engage also other programs and partners in a portfolio of projects that we are working on to ensure that this vision touches down in the key geographies where we are, and also share the same models or lessons with others where we don't work. So generally, our goal for Africa in terms of fisheries is to identify those productive marine fisheries and ecosystems and protect them because of the role they play in terms of provision for food as well as livelihood security. Next. So in terms of work, we do have a number of areas where we work. One of them focusing on large-scale fisheries, but mostly on tuna. And we have ongoing work in Kenya as well as in Seychelles, and also planning to expand to other Africa countries. But also this work has really grown in other areas like in the Pacific. And the other key focus of our work is coastal fisheries, mainly focusing on community-based fisheries work and applying tools such as FishPath, developed by TNC as well as other partners, including NOAA and CSIRO of Australia. And it helps to ensure that we put fisheries on the path to sustainability. The other component is on addressing or tackling illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, where we work with government and partners to ensure that we are supporting the governments to implement their port state measures agreements so that we can improve effective fisheries governance, especially focusing on IUU. And the third and the subject of this session or webinar today is on sustainable aquaculture. And particularly the restorative aquaculture. And as many of you may know, restorative aquaculture occurs when commercial or subsistence aquaculture provides direct ecological benefits to the environment with the potential to generate net positive environmental outcomes. And with all this, we also apply technology, like electronic monitoring systems or electronic catch assessment, just to ensure that we are moving with the times and also improving traceability. Next. So basically, broadly, our work focuses on two pillars, especially now narrowing down into aquaculture. And the first pillar is focuses on smart growth aquaculture. And this mainly ensures that aquaculture grows in a sustainable way to meet the demand of the global seafood through improving governance and aquaculture reforms, as well as also sustainable financing by catalyzing impact capital. And the second pillar is on restorative aquaculture, which we'll talk about today, and involves supporting and developing of aquaculture in a way that contributes to ecosystem recovery. And as you can see, the focus of the key activities are broadly on tools, building capacity as well as tools. And as I said, financial tools and collaborations, because we know we cannot work alone. We have to bring different partners, including government, together so that we can scale up and scale in terms of the work that we are doing, but also ensuring that we are applying science in the aquaculture that we are doing. You know, engaging research institutions, as well as ensuring that we are addressing the challenges that are facing aquaculture by conducting cutting edge science with other partners. But most importantly, and especially for this session, is also, you know, applying farmers partnerships, working with partners to develop best farming practices and deploying the same to the farmers and buyers to be able to improve productivity as well as reduce impact on ecosystem. And, applying this farmer training BMPs or best farming practices, supporting them to be adopted by the buyers so that the aquaculture industry can thrive, because it is also important to, create reforms, not only through the production part of the value chain, but also through the market. And hopefully, focusing on improving policy and markets as well as partnerships. And then at the end of the day is to ensure that this aquaculture is growing in a way that has less environmental impact, more seafood production that is done in a sustainable way, as well as improved livelihoods, and also, contributing towards restoration efforts. Thank you. Next. So I'm gonna focus a little bit on the region, especially where we are working on, and particularly with the focus on community-led conservation. And just to say that the reason we are working where we are working is because TNC started this by doing a form of analysis that looks at areas with the highest return on investment in terms of conservation as well as livelihood. And you can follow those two papers that are referenced there for more information, but also because there are great partnerships where we can be able to, establish partnerships for lasting success. And on the left there, you can see some of the areas where our community-based work is heavily focused on, and that's include seaweed aquaculture. Next. And then this slide here just gives an overview of a kind of a baseline that was done to look at seaweed sites in Tanzania and their suitability. And these also, through literature review that we did, informed the priority sites that we are currently piloting or working on with different partners, of which you will have my colleague Mondy follow up with more details on this. Next. And then, next. And then what challenges are we addressing? It's basically challenges that are related to habitat impacts, as well as pollution, especially water, and also damage to wild stock species of seaweeds, as well as addressing diseases that are related to issues that are related to diseases. So these broadly are the key issues affecting the seaweed industry and that are making it not to grow as it is supposed to grow, and be able also to help relieve some pressure from fishing and improve communities' livelihoods. Next. So this infographic here kind of highlights, why are we doing what we are doing? And this simply presents an infographic demonstrating environmental benefits of restorative aquaculture. And our approach is to ensure that we are developing seaweed aquaculture in a manner that benefits nature as well as communities, as I said earlier. And as you can see there on the right side, focusing on seaweed, you can see number one relates to mitigating nutrient pollution. And then number two relates to providing habitats. And then number three, it also relates to supporting, enhancement of fish stocks. And number four relates to reducing local climate change impacts. So those are the key areas in terms of environmental benefits that restorative seaweed farming aquaculture helps. And for example, a single hectare of a restorative farm removes more than half ton of nitrogen from the environment, which could cost around $50,000 to remove in terms of cleaning. And again, 1 hectare of restorative farm filters up to 20 million gallons of water per day. And then also 1 hectare of a restorative farm increases the abundance of wild fish up to 5 tons per year. And then again, 1 hectare of a restorative farm captures carbon dioxide in the water and prevents ocean acidification. So this is kind of just highlights the importance of what we are talking about, restorative aquaculture. Next. And therefore, sharing lessons based on our work in Tanzania, which also has borrowed a lot from lessons within the country, as well as from other areas like Belize and Indonesia. So what we are focusing on is to ensure there is proper siting of farms, as well as improved farming methods, improved seed collection, and also application of seasonal calendars in terms of farming activities, and also improving proper harvesting techniques, quality seaweeds and the like. And next, and in terms of all this work, as I said earlier, we do not work alone. We work through partnerships, and also taking advantage of the platforms that exist on restorative seaweed aquaculture to be able to, expand the work that we do. Next slide. And so our strategic approach is to ensure that we are conducting peer-to-peer learning exchanges and also connecting with other networks. And therefore, this webinar is one of that, as well as connecting with government and also applying seascape approach and holistic ones that also includes collaborative management of fisheries, and as well as aligning with the national government processes, for example, the national level marine spatial planning. So, and that way, aquaculture becomes part of a bigger strategy, not only for TNC, but also for the government. I will now invite Mondy to dive deeper into a case study and share lessons. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, George. Our next speaker today is Mondy Muhando, who is a seaweed trainer for the Nature Conservancy Zanzibar Sustainable Seaweed Farming Project and a fisheries officer at the Ministry of Blue Economy and Fisheries in Zanzibar. Mondy specializes in seaweed mariculture, fisheries, and tropical aquatic ecology.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mondy Muhando, speaking from joining from Tumbe village in Pemba, one of the villages that we implemented this project on. And it's an honor to share with you the lesson learned and all about the project that we did. So very welcome. Next slide, please. So this project took place in Zanzibar, which is an archipelago with many small islands and two main islands, which are Unguja and Pemba, and they're situated at the Western Indian Ocean. And it has about 2,462 kilometers square, and a population of 503,569 people. There are about 23,000 seaweed farmers. Most of the coastal communities here engage in marine activities such as fisheries, and among the 23,000 seaweed farmers, 80% of them are women. And the most farmed species are spinosum and cottony variant. And generally, seaweed farming contributes ranks third in the GDP, which is the GDP of Zanzibar, following tourism industry and the cloth industry. And of recently, the government is looking into producing about 30,000 tons of seaweed per year to cover the value addition industry in Zanzibar. Next slide, please. Yes, so for the first phase of the project, which was the pilot phase, we planned, the TNC planned at practicing seaweed restorative aquaculture, and with the intention of minimizing the environmental impact, as well as having a way to produce seaweed in a sustainable manner and an increased manner. So improve the quality and the quantity sustainably over time, as well as improve the livelihood of farmers that are involved in these villages. And to get to that, we had the objective of first demonstrating a proof of concept for the seaweed sustainability and livelihood program in the 3 villages, for the pilot villages, as well as creating opportunities for upscaling these trainings to Tanzania and beyond, so that other seaweed farmers could benefit out of this. Next slide, please. This project pioneered a multi-sectoral collaboration, which involved the farmers themselves, as well as government, the government, which is in this end, with Department of Fisheries Development and Marine Resources, which is under the Ministry of Blue Economy and Fisheries, as well as Research Urbanization, which is the institute, and it brought in seaweed farming industry. That's nationally, we worked with Seaweed Corporation, which is a seaweed buyer here in Zanzibar, one of the biggest seaweed buyers in Zanzibar, as well as Cargill Inc. Next slide. And for the first phase, we ventured in trainings. And for that, we developed a training manual, and this was in collaboration with the team, which involved, as I said, the stakeholders involved, which was the TNC, the government, as well as the seed buyers. And we gathered the information that was used to create the training from a baseline that we conducted from the 3 villages, as well as all the internet. We gathered from all the international best management practices that are already there, and we gathered it together and used it to create a training manual that involved things like environmental protections and better ways of taking care of the farm, how to properly construct your farm, where to source your seed and how a good seed should look like, how to prevent and maintain prevent diseases, and how to maintain your farm on a daily basis, and post-harvest care as well. Next slide, please. So after we developed the training deck based on the baseline we conducted and all the information gathered that were best for seaweed farming practices, we trained 183 farmers, both in class and in class theory trainings, as well as practical sessions. And these 183 farmers were from all three villages. And the training team included the team from Seaweed Corporation, which are the buyers, as well as the government officers, both in Pemba and Unguja, and the TNC Seaweed trainer, which was me. And with that, we had an input design for the farming inputs were given by the seaweed buyers. This time it was Cargill and Seed Corporation that were used for practice. And during a practical session, we had we came together with the farmers and had community farm built so that everyone could learn out of it. And afterwards, we implemented this training that was practiced in class theory and practicals to their own. They implemented this in their own farms. And the whole intention was to move them from the traditional designs or traditional methods that weren't so productive into more productive methods and more sustainable methods, which were best management practices for their seaweed farming. And these were both we're considering environmental consciousness, conscious practices, as well as introducing to them a method that would see later during the presentation that increases productivity. And unlike any other trainings, after training them in class and in practicals, we monitored them as well as provided one-to-one farmer mentoring in their farms to see how the implementation of the trainings were going on and help out if any farmer were stuck anywhere. Next slide, please. Along with that, together with the team, we are developing a Tanzanian seaweed guide, which is a guide for conservationists, practitioners, and seaweed buyers, as well as government, which intends to be a foundation for key players in the seaweed industry, for regulators, policymakers, scientists, and community leaders engaging in seaweed. It intends to improve the understanding and the challenges and opportunities and better management practices for the seaweed practices, the seaweed aquaculture practices in Tanzania and in the WIA region. And this is adopted to Tanzania as well as the Western Indian Ocean context. With this, the BMPs that I included within the guide includes the establishment of standardized farm designs, as well as adoption of the double-mudded loop system, which was the farming technology used, which I'll talk about it in the next slide, and as well as adopting the tender loving care of approach for farmers, because we know for seaweed to grow better, it needs the environment to be great, also to have a great farming techniques, but last not least, which is one of the most important thing, is the farmers themselves to have much dedication to their farms, and that's including the tender loving care. Next. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. The farming technology that was used to train farmers was the double-mudded loop system. This was a system developed by an Indonesian seaweed farmer. his name was Madesimbic, and it involves tying 2 seeds on a spot of 1, and this method allows for increase in productivity to 2 times or 3 times, and on a single line, and it does not need to expand to expand your farm areas. So you can use the same area, just increase the amount of seedlings that you have within the lines. And this allows for effective utilization of the farm lines and the farm spaces that the farmers have. Next slide, please. So as I said in the beginning, we had a baseline survey for all the trainees, the farmers who participated during the trainings, and afterwards, after the trainings and some implementation and some mentoring and monitoring, we did a post-training survey, and these are the results from the comparison of the post-training survey and the baseline that we conducted. Looking at the social metrics that we had aimed and targeted to train 100 farmers, and we managed to train 183 farmers. That was 83% above the target. And generally, there was a great satisfaction for the farmers on the trainings, who expressed that the trainings were quite good and they would love to have more trainings to other farmers who did not participate, as well as other village. They expressed the interest that other people need to know about this, because it was a good there were good trainings, and they learned much more on how to better and sustainably do their farming practices. Furthermore, we had aimed to train about 70% of farmers, but we trained 62%. We are hoping as we go on, we'd get to train more farmers. And looking at the environmental matrices, we were looking into reducing the use of mangrove stakes, because of close proximity to the farms. Most farmers do cut mangrove trees to use them for stakes in their farms. During these trainings, we saw that during the post training survey, we saw that there was a 20% reduction in farmers who initially reported to use mangrove stakes. And we also traced the amount of plastic debris in the farms. We saw those 44% decrease in farmers who once reported to throw that used up lines or leave and abandon the used up lines in the ocean, and now they properly take the used up ropes and dispose them properly after they have received trainings. But with that, we saw there was an increase in the use of plastic bottles, and these plastic bottles are used as floats or buoys, and this is because the farmers thought there's a need to use buoys to let their farm lines float more, because now they are heavier, there's double the productivity. So to avoid any loss of seaweed, they thought it would be best to use more plastic bottles, because they can't afford much of this SPF 20, for instance, floats for their seaweed farms. Furthermore, generally, for all 3 villages, we were able to impact over about 528 hectares of coastal areas under improved management. And these include all the farm areas that the 183 farmers were farming. Furthermore, these farmers that we trained were either living in households that had other seaweed farmers, or they are farming in areas in proximity to or next to other farmers who we have observed that are also practicing the double mother loop, and they're getting also the best management practices trainings from the farmers who participated in the training. So we had about 303 spillover additional farmers who benefited from the project that we implemented. And furthermore, there was a 167% increase in the double mother loop system technology that we introduced. And most of this was from the farmers who originally didn't practice the double mother loop, but also those adoption to farmers who heard of it and now they are practicing it. So looking into the post-training observation as well, most farmers found that the double mother loop technology was one of the things that they valued most, as well as how to better do their farm management practices and how to apply the tender loving cares to their farms, as well as they learned on sustainable, they valued the information they received, the training from the sustainable seaweed farming and how to take care of the environment. Next slide, please. Generally, out of the trainings, we learned that applying mentorship, or this mentorship works when we are constructing them or programming them, we should always look into the need base of the local community. So conduct baseline surveys to see what they actually need so that you can train them on their need base. Furthermore, to ease adoption of the trainings or the method that I implemented, it's best also to improve adoption for the best management practices. It's best to select champion or model farmers who would stand as a way to help other farmers ease adoption, but also showcase motivate other farmers to accept whatever trainings or knowledge that you're impacting to them. Furthermore, practitioners should be aware, should put in mind the local language they use and the community, it's so that they can best reach the community they're working with. So the use of local language in this case was Swahili, as well as a more illustrated manual for the trainings that had more pictorial views and less of words, was easier for them to catch up and understand. Furthermore, it's important to consider social aspects when setting up the trainings. For example, double mother loop system requires quite more time in I was speaking of the social culture aspect, like the timetables for women. So when you're setting up times, for instance, these women already are engaging in so many other activities afterwards. So just minimize the training sessions to fit their normal schedules and normal cultural activities that they're already working on. But furthermore, the double mother loop system and the BMP, such as the double mother loop system, it was a good one and they loved it, but it takes much time to tie it up and prepare it. So adoption could be a little bit challenging, but the use of champions and models would help, as well as informing and making the farmers see the benefits more out of the few helps in the adoption. Furthermore, involving government partnership with government is a good key, because the government already has links to more village farmers than the ones that you are training. And in our case, it involving the government officers helped spread the knowledge and the trainings to other farmers through the fisheries officers from the government that we involved, that we partnered with, who participated during the trainings with us. Furthermore, broader scale up and impact requires wide partnership with all stakeholders that are engaged in seaweed farming industry. And last and not least, gender equity, and this equity in terms of gender mainstreaming is quite important. And just as I said before, most of the farmers here in Zanzibar are women. So capturing their needs and how to help them through these trainings was quite an important thing that we learned. Yes, next slide, please. During journey, we had so many documentation, which you can all visit and learn from. The articles in the articles on this project online, as well as on the TNC website, as well as on several magazines such as the Johari outlet and the UN program, environmental program. So we can share a link and you can get to see all these exciting documents for our journey. Apart from that, there's also a video that we can get to look at right now.
Kilimo cha mwani ni muhimu kwangu kwa sababu ndicho kinachonipatia maslahi.
Seaweed farming is a great source of income for most coastal communities around the world, especially for women, because culturally and because of norms and standards, they are not allowed to fish in deeper waters. Here in Zanzibar, TNC is collaborating with Cargill, Seaweed Corporation, and the government to train seaweed farmers on sustainable ways of farming seaweed, and so far it engages 3 villages. Seaweed farming can be environmentally sustainable as it requires no freshwater use for production or land and creates no carbon emission.
If the environment is poor, the seaweed will not grow, because there is a very close relationship between environment and seaweed farming.
When farmed well, seaweed farming can be environmentally restorative by improving the water quality and providing additional habitats for the fish.
Cargill and Seaweed Corporation has been working together for a long period of time to buy red seaweed from the farmers that is used to extract carrageenan, an ingredient which is used in many applications, from food to personal care.
We are excited to train farmers on seaweed best management practices that would help to protect the environment as well as increase their productivity. During trainings, we've taught farmers on better site selections for their farms, as well as introduced a farming technique that increases the production to 2 or 3 times more, and it's called the double muddy loop. It involves tying 2 seedlings on one spot. We've also identified and mentored champion farmers who would showcase these techniques to other farmers.
Sasa hivi nimefaidika na mafunzo tena kwa nguvu sana, sababu nimejifunza kwenye unyonyeshaji wa mwani, nimejifunza kwenye kufunga mwani, na nimejifunza kwenye uanikaji wa mwani kuongezea kipato.
Basi tunasema kwamba zao la mwani ni sekta muhimu sana katika uchumi, lakini ni sekta ambayo inakwenda direct au moja kwa moja wa jamii husika ya visiwa vya Unguja na Pemba. Nashukuru sana kama upande wa serikali kwa mashirikiano ambayo yameonyeshwa kati ya TNC, Seaweed na Kaggle, ambao tunasema kwamba ni mashirikiano ambayo ni mazuri na yanahitaji kuendelezwa ili faida ya mafunzo haya yaweze kupatikana kwa vijiji vingine.
Through this project, you help to improve management of over 100 hectares of coastal areas. At the end of this project, we are impacting the farmers by providing them a way that they can benefit by increasing their productivity. On the other hand, it helps the environment through sustainable seaweed farming practices.
Now we will switch to the question and answer session of this webinar. Thank you so much, Mondy, for your presentation, and George as well. It's great to hear about the successes you all have achieved in Zanzibar, as well as lessons learned that local managers could consider in their own sustainable aquaculture efforts. Now we'll switch over to the Q&A session that Diana Petrie from ERG will moderate. So please remember, there are two ways you can ask questions: in the Q&A box and by raising your hand to speak.
Great. Thanks so much, Michelle. And thank you, Mondy and George, for those great presentations. And so, as Michelle said, you can ask questions in the chat or the Q&A. And also I encourage folks, we have a lot of questions, which is awesome. We're likely not going to get through all of them, but George has been doing a really great job in the Q&A of typing in responses to some of those questions. So you can see some of those questions that have been already been asked, and then also go to those that have been, see the answers within the Q&A function. So there are a few questions that I've seen come in that relate to the economic viability of seaweed farming within the area, and how viable it is, and if what can be done to increase the value of the products that are being generated from seaweed farms. And so, Mondy or George, I wondered if either of you could speak to that question.
Mondy, you can take it, please.
Please come again.
Yes, related to the economic viability of seaweed farmings and how what can be done to increase the value of these products.
Thank you very much. Well, seaweed, we already, most of us know that it has value, and it's used to make so much products, as well as its carrageen uses. We see that most communities are still trying to especially in so speaking more in a Zanzibar view, most communities, most of the seaweed farming in Zanzibar is sold as an export raw material product. So we're looking into tapping into a more direct a way to transport a product that it can be used direct for consumption. That would be one step to increase the value of the product. So find more use for the product, and a way that this product can be moved from, so improving the value chain generally.
Good. And if I can add, is that as Mondy said, addressing the quality issues of the seaweed product is important in increasing the value. For example, the more viscous seaweeds are, the lesser the price. and therefore drying them and keeping them in areas that are less wet will improve quality and therefore fetch higher price. Adopting these best farming practices will also ensure that the quality of the seaweed is higher and therefore fetch a better price, as well as farmers be able to produce more kilos per hectare or per day, and therefore, increase the bargaining power with the buyers. So these are some of the issues that could help increase the price, but also addressing the problem from the market side is also important to ensure that there's also equity and price issues addressed not only from the farmer and the buyer, but also from the government side in terms of addressing policy issues and the needs of the seaweed industry players.
Great, thanks, George and Mondy, for those responses. So shifting gears a little bit, another question that has come up in the chat relates to pollution in the Zanzibar area and wondering how seaweed farming is going to help or could help change the impact of pollution in that area. And before you respond, I do just want to note too, for participants, we're going to be compiling a question and answer document that will be sent out after the webinar. So just know that please continue to type in your questions. Any questions that we don't get to, we will follow up with speakers to get the responses and send out the PDF of the Q&A to everybody. So again, that question though was on pollution and how seaweed farming could change the impact of pollution within Zanzibar.
So seaweeds are known to be bioremediators. They take out excess nutrients from the environment, from the water. So having seaweed, as you said, this is a restorative aquaculture, and it brings a positive positive impact to the environment. So it takes up the excess nutrients. So it might help in some percentages to reduce the rate of pollution in the waters in Zanzibar. What else?
A quick addition is that part of the restorative seaweed aquaculture work is proper siting of aquaculture farms. For example, in areas far away from polluted areas or point source areas of pollution. So, that kind of local level spatial plan to ensure that farms are placed in the right place, that will help address that contamination. But at a national level, coming up with a national level marine spatial plan for the entire EEZ would help, ensure that these different uses are not competing and are not interacting with each other in a negative way. And I understand Tanzania, including Zanzibar, is considering doing a feasibility for marine spatial planning.
Thank you for those responses. Another question that has come up in the Q&A relates to how do you choose, or are there criteria for selecting sites specifically in relation to in areas with typhoons, and what are those criteria?
Yeah, I think in terms of site selection, which is a critical component of seaweed farming, one factor is exposure. Because if farms are put where there are strong waves or currents, then they are washed away, and then they becomes a problem. So I think if we adopt best siting practices in terms of where the farms are placed, then the impact or exposure to strong waves, currents, and typhoons are reduced.
Thanks for that response. There's another question that's come up in the Q&A related to potential user conflicts with the areas where these sites are. So with things like tourism or with windsurfers, and wanting to hear more about, have there been any conflicts for use of these areas with the farms in particular?
Mondy, you can take That one up. Regarding resource use conflicts, they are common. For example, the seaweed farms are also where fishers go, as well as some farms are placed in front of tourism establishment, and therefore resource use conflicts are common. And this is where one issue that needs to be addressed is the zoning. And the zoning could be at the local level using collaborative approaches with the fishers to ensure that uses are allocated in terms of space or even time. Yes, those conflicts are common. And with the tourism establishment, it's a slightly bigger issue.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for that response, George. Well, thank you both to George and Mondy again for your responses. And as I said, for all of these questions that we have, there's been a great number of questions. We really appreciate it. And we will be compiling the question and answer document to send out to participants following the webinar. But for now, we're almost at the end of our time. So I want to pass it back to Michelle to close us out for the day.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers today and all of our attendees for joining today's webinar. I wanted to share some resources that we have available, and these will be sent out via email as well. First up, we have development of sustainable aquaculture in coastal communities. In 2021, TNC released this case studies report that you see here on the slide that assesses 5 different community-based aquaculture initiatives around the world and highlights key enabling conditions for project successes and challenges. We also have the Aquaculture Toolkit, which you can find on our website at reefresilience.org, and the promise of restorative aquaculture solutions. This is an article on restorative aquaculture in Tanzania. We also have trainings for sustainable cultivation of seaweed in Zanzibar. This is a case study that provides more detail on the sustainable aquaculture work that Mondy shared today, and the Tanzania Seaweed Guide. TNC is currently in the process of designing this guide, which will be finalized in early August. And again, here is what the beginning of that aquaculture toolkit looks like on our website. This link will be sent around. And if you are interested in getting more information and resources from the Reef Resilience Network, we hope you'll become a member. You can go ahead and use the link at the bottom of the slide to sign up for our newsletter and webinar announcements. And this is the email that we'll be sending all of the resources and today's webinar recording to. We hope that everyone has a nice day or night wherever you may be in the world. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you very much to everyone.